fund, I will promote a constitutional amendment that strictly limits the fund to be used only either for, one, its intended purpose of meeting unforeseen budgetary shortfalls, reducing existing debt, one-time infrastructure payments, and expenses related to state disasters. Even with these new restrictions, the rainy day fund should only be tapped if it exceeds a certain minimum balance. Together, these measures will ensure the rainy day fund does not turn into an ATM that can be raided whenever passions to spend more money arise in Austin, Texas. Well, next, to ensure public trust and confidence in government, taxpayers must have a government that is more transparent and more accountable. To bolster that trust and confidence, I suggest 5 reforms that will make our budget clearer, cleaner, and leaner. One reason why Texans are frustrated about taxes and spending is that money intended for a particular purpose is sometimes used for something entirely different. Take transportation as one example. We need to stop diverting transportation funding away from building roads. Money raised for roads should be spent on roads. I also believe it's time to constitutionally dedicate a portion of the motor vehicle sales tax to road construction and maintenance. These changes will improve both trust and confidence in our state budget and will add billions more dollars to keep Texans moving. Another thing that we have to do is to stop the financial shell game that's used to balance the state's budget. The state imposes more than 200 taxes and fees that are intended to go to a specific purpose. Programs like updating the 9/11 service, or programs like sexual assault programs. Often those fees and taxes don't go to their intended purpose. Instead, the money is left unspent for the purpose of certifying the other parts of the budget. More than $4 billion falls into this category. I will work to ensure either that these funds are used for their intended purpose or that the assessment for them is eliminated. And along those lines, I will also work for a constitutional amendment that prohibits using these dedicated accounts to certify the state budget. It is time to kick the habit of budgetary shell games and accounting gimmickry. Now, we also have some budget and debt related issues at the local level that can be addressed from the state perspective. To better control budgets, to ensure tax dollars are being spent wisely, taxpayers should be given more information about debt before voting on it. Debt has a role in building infrastructure. Just like most of you couldn't buy a house or buy a car without incurring debt, local governments can't build schoolhouses or can't build roads on which cars travel without incurring debt. Unchecked, however, debt can become an anchor on government and eventually an anchor on the taxpayers. Debt today becomes taxes tomorrow. It can stifle economic growth and limit job creation. In Texas, we have debt that's far heavier than most Texans know. Altogether, local governments owe more than $2 billion. Some cities in Texas owe well over $5,000 per person in debt. Our local bond debt is the second highest per capita among the large states. Well, to get a handle on our debt, voters should be given more information on the ballot itself about current debt before making a decision about whether or not to incur even more debt in the future. The second thing that you deserve All local taxing entities should be required to post their financial information online so voters can more readily see it and determine the financial condition of your local authorities. I find that democracy works best when voters are more fully informed. Well, Judge, I know that issues like these pose challenges for local governments. But I also think it's time that the state be more responsive to counties by backing off of some of the mandates the state has been imposing on local governments. One reason why local debt is so high is because of unfunded mandates by the state. If the state wants local governments to do something, the state should shoulder more responsibility for those tasks. Under current law, the legislature can impose requirements on local governments without providing funding to meet those requirements. As just one example, the Fair Defense Act requires counsel for indigent defendants in criminal cases. Last year, that state law cost about $207 million. The state paid about $28 million of that cost, while counties were stuck with about $179 million of that tab. A constitutional amendment should be passed prohibiting the legislature from putting any more unfunded mandates on local governments. The last thing I will do is something that directly impacts and should include people like those in the room today. I will work with the legislature to reform our current sunset system and replace it with a citizen commission on government waste. The truth is, the sunset process seldom eliminates unnecessary agencies, and it simply becomes a vehicle for special interest carve-outs at the Capitol, which should look to programs like what they have in Florida. Florida appoints 25 community and business leaders to a taxation and budget reform commission